Okay, I was thinking about something the other day, and it kind of made me wonder this whole atheist and foxholes argument that theists make all the time. I got to thinking about it because I've had a couple of personal experiences that I've had a personal, damn it, I've had a couple of close calls where I come close to dying in during a dive, and essentially the story. Basically, I thought I'd share that story with you. I was diving off of the East Coast, off the coast of South Carolina, about 25 miles offshore, and essentially the dive computer I was using, it was a brand new computer. Before I had even gotten in the water, I'd activated it, but I'd activated it way too early. It was a 2 hour boat ride. The computer had shut back down. It did not have water contacts, which means if it had had water contacts, it would have reactivated as soon as it hit the water. And that was not the case. So my first mistake was not paying attention to that and not knowing that. And the other problem was the computer essentially gave me readout information on my air, depth, dive profile, everything. I had no information whatsoever on what was going on. Well, that wouldn't be a problem if I would have paid attention. But one of the biggest issues I had was that I was spearfishing. First time I'd ever spearfished. So essentially, what happens there is when you get into a situation like that, you're spearfishing, you get single minded in what you're wanting to accomplish, and you have a tendency not to pay attention to what's going on around you. So, anyway, I got into the water, and we're going along about 5 feet or so, and I notice my computer's not on. So I go ahead and try to activate it in the water. I did not know at the time that any computer has to be calibrated first, which means that you have to activate it on the surface. Well, I always did it out of habit anyway, and I knew that that was the way to go. I was not aware, though, that it's built with a default that it will not stay activated if you try to activate it underwater, because it'll throw the calibration off, which means all the information you'll be getting on your dive profile will be false, which puts you in a really dangerous position, because when it comes to diving, a lot of times you're running the ragged edge of, catastrophe when it comes to things like your dive profile, the depth you're going to. I mean, your body's under extreme pressures at times. You're breathing compressed air. There's just a whole lot of issues, but essentially, I'm also breathing 32% nitrox, which is essentially just a 32% oxygen mixture. It's just enriched air. It's all this, but it gives you a little extended bottom time at 100 to 130 feet, which is really good. Um, it has its inherent risks too, but those are generally don't manifest unless you go deeper. You run the risk of oxygen toxicity for high dose short term exposures that affects your central nervous system, but that's not really here nor there. Essentially, I get down to 100 feet and I see the fish that I'm looking to shoot, and I essentially take a shot and miss. And one of the things about spearfishing is it's very difficult to do because you're having to shoot by simply, well, it's similar to shooting a bow and arrow on the land. You really don't have sights on these guns, and sights wouldn't do you much good anyway, because underwater, everything appears 25% larger and about 32% closer, which really skews your depth perception. That is a real big issue. And for a first time spear fisherman, it doesn't help. So it took me 3 shots to even hit him. And when I did hit him, it was a 5 foot fish. He drugged me around all over the place. It wasn't pretty. So when I finally got him in and actually had clipped him to my side, he was dead at this point. I drifted. I had no idea where I was. I didn't see the anchor line anywhere. I looked at my computer, noticed just was crap. It wasn't working. I had been stupid enough to essentially not pay attention to anything else around me. I was too, uh, basically obsessed with getting that fish and dealing with him. And at this point, I had burned just about every bit of my air. I know now, looking back. So at this point, I turn around, make a decision in which direction to go. I happen to get lucky enough for it to be in the direction of the anchor line, and there happen to be two divers on it. And I basically run out of air right before I get there, have to give the signal, and my lungs are screaming at this point. My mind is running 100 miles a minute, and I start sharing air with this guy, and he passes me on to the next guy after a couple of minutes because I'm sucking his air down like crazy. I'm at this point because I'm under such stress. So anyway, we get up to 15 feet, and we need to do a stop because when you're diving at any depths below 60 feet for any amount of time, it's always a good safety measure to do what we call mandatory safety stops, even though they're really decompression stops to alleviate the built up gas in your system to keep it from essentially trying to release from the pressure difference. So anyway, I stay there for a few minutes and decide that I'm ready to go. I got to get up, and so I get up to the boat, and everything worked out fine. But I was essentially terrified after this happened, and I had a splitting headache from the CO2 buildup in my respiratory system. I had not expelled enough of it because I was hyperventilating. It was probably shallow breathing too. So I essentially sat out the next dive, and I wasn't even sure that I wanted to ever dive again after that. But I forced myself to continue and do a third dive, and I was so shook up by it that I didn't stay down the third dive, but for even half the time I could have. And I stayed really close to the anchor line, and essentially, had my fun and came back up. But that was key. I do know people that have bad experiences, close calls in diving, and never go back due to that. Me personally, I wanted to force myself to get back in the water because I just didn't think it was worth it to give it up. I love diving. It's my favorite thing in the world to do. And I made stupid decisions, and I've got no one to blame but myself for putting myself in that position. But not at no point during that event did I ever once pray to a God or think about a God or anything. I was an atheist before, and I was an atheist after, and it changed nothing for me. So the idea that there's no atheists in foxholes is the most retarded thing I've ever heard of. I do know a couple of people who were over in the war, and they were atheists, and they remained atheists. Some even became atheists during some of these experiences. So, I think it's a really, really horrible argument, and it puts you, for me, any belief in a higher power and the idea that you're going to pray to get yourself out of a situation is absurd because it puts you essentially in a position of acquiescence to what essentially amounts to whatever happens. And, without even thinking that you can make a difference, and you're not proactive in the process, and that is a big problem for me. Um, I just can't see sitting around waiting for something to happen rather than trying to get myself out of a situation, which was exactly what I was doing to begin with. If I'd have bothered to sit around praying while I was at 100 feet running out of air, I don't know that I would be here today. So I think it's absurd. But just thought I would share that with you and give my opinion on the subject anyway.